Hey everybody, this is Jason. This is Jay's Project Garage. Like I said in the last video, we're going to get started on the 69, replacing the floors. I started cutting it out last weekend and I ran out of time to actually make a video on it. But I got a little bit of footage, so we'll try to stick it in wherever we can. We're going to replace the front floors from the back of the seat risers forward. We're going to replace the underfloor supports, both torque boxes now, and both toe boards. But I'll go through and I'll show you why we're going through all that. It's if you looked at them, they really weren't that bad until you really looked at them, and then you could see where the in between two panels they were starting to blister, and that's a surefire sign that you got a bunch of rust in between the two. And normally the panel that you can't see it's usually rusted out. So. But we'll start cutting the other side apart, and I'll show you what's going on with that. But this car wound up being a lot worse than what I originally thought, and it can happen to you, or it can happen to somebody that's been around it forever. Sometimes you just miss stuff, or there's a lot of patches and stuff in there that weren't done right before, so you really can't see what's underneath them. So. But we'll go through and I'll show you what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and all that stuff. Alright, so I went ahead and cut the seat platform out just so I get a look at the floor, and you kind of see what I was talking about, where they've had welded patches in all over the place and where they had pieces that were pop riveted in. I cut those out. But this thing's just patches on top of patches on top of patches, and none of it is really right. And underneath it there's still a bunch of rusty metal. The only way to fix it is just to cut all this out and replace it all. But this is the toe board that I was talking about. So we'll be replacing it, and we'll be replacing the front floor back to in here somewhere, right about where the platform is. And then probably, I don't know, up into here somewhere. Once I start getting it cut apart, I'll get a better idea. But here's the new floor, and you can see it comes back to just about where I want to section it anyway. But at the front, and like I said in another video, you're going to see this a lot on aftermarket panels where they give you way more than you actually need. But you can see on the original how it ends here. The toe board goes underneath about an inch and a half or so, I guess, and then this lays on top. But you can see how the new panel comes. It goes way up on the firewall. And I guess if all you're trying to do is fix rust, that's fine, but we want to try to make this thing look as factory as we possibly can. So we're going to go through and we're just going to cut it so it looks exactly the same as the originals. The toe board does wrap underneath the way it's supposed to. So underneath, when all's said and done, I'll be able to seam seal the top and the bottom, and it'll look factory. And like I said, that's really the whole idea behind doing restoration stuff. Okay, I got some of the floor cut out, and you can see all they did was overlap the old stuff. Overlapping it's okay, but they didn't weld the new piece to the frame rail, and you can see how much rust and everything they left in there. The whole bottom of this toe board is completely gone, and they just left it. So we're going to get all that cut out of there, and once I get this toe board cut out of here, I'll show you the torque box. Okay, we're putting the floor, just kind of mocking stuff up before I cut the rest of it out. But same way we did with the apron, we want to keep some kind of a reference, so we're going to use the old seat platform holes. We're going to get the floor pan set in there front to back about where it was before, so we can go through and we can use masking tape. I made a little mark on the inner rocker so that when I set the floor in, I know where the tape goes. So just use masking tape. Another little trick is you're going to have a little bit left over because you always wind up tearing off too much. Just make a little arrow so you know which side of the line to cut on. Nothing sucks more than going through all this just to figure out that you cut it on the wrong side. So just a little tip. Okay, so this is the underfloor support on the passenger side, and you can see there's a little blister, and you can see it's rusted through. And a lot of guys will look at that and think, well, I can just cut a little section out right there and patch it, and it will be fine. The problem is, this doesn't look that bad, but once I get the support out of there, you're going to see that this whole frame rail is going to be a disaster. So I'll get it cut apart and then I'll show you. Okay, so I got it all ground and got it cut off. It may be hard to see on camera, But the back side of this thing is just solid rust. It's all scaly, and you can see where that rust hole was. I don't know if you can see how thick that is, but it's probably a good 1/16 of an inch thick, and that's just scaly rust. And if you just cut a little patch out of it and put it in there, you're not actually fixing anything. You can see where it's almost rusted all the way through. Just putting little patches in isn't going to fix the rust, it's just going to hide it. So the only way to fix this is to cut everything apart. And I'm actually going to section the bottom of this rail in. I've already done it on the driver's side. I'll show you how I did it, and I'll show you how I do it on this side. Okay, so I went through and I started cutting some of the patches out of the passenger side. This isn't even a floor pan that they put in. This is just some random piece of sheet metal. But you can look and see what's behind it. I mean, there's still remnants of the old floor pan, and you can see how rusted out the torque box is. This isn't fixing stuff. This isn't fixing cars. This is just, you know, I see this a lot, and it's really just guys trying to keep water out of the inside of the car. This is a unibody car, so everything on this thing is important. The frame rail ties into the torque box ties into the rocker, and it all ties into the floor and the firewall and the transmission tunnel. That's how the car is rigid. You go taking some of that out, you lose a lot of the structural integrity of the car. Not just in an accident, but just driving down the road. Imagine what this thing is going through, especially with a 390 in the front of it. What this thing's going through, just hitting potholes and going around corners. There's a lot of stress that's going on in this thing, so you have to keep all that kind of stuff in mind when you're doing repairs. Something else for you guys to watch out for is make sure that you go around and you check underneath the car before you start cutting. There's going to be mount points and stuff that you're going to need to watch out for, like on this one. There's a bracket on the back side for the emergency brake. If you're going back to original, you definitely want this stuff back on there, but I'm putting disc brakes on the back of this thing, and it's still going to have an emergency brake. It's a 4-speed car, so it kind of needs it. But you want to pay attention to this kind of stuff because you need to put it back on. And I'm going to be using all the original cables and everything to hook back into the new emergency brake. And down the road, I'll go through all that stuff and show you how I'm planning on doing it. So I know I've preached in the past about trying to take things out in as big a chunks you can, like with the apron. That way you can use the old one to make sure the edges and everything are where they need to be. Same kind of with the floors. I like leaving as much of it in there as I can initially, setting the new one in there, using holes like the bolt holes for the seat underneath. Helps locate it so that you can tell where you need to cut it at the front. But when it comes to the torque boxes, they are what they are. Those things are actually made pretty well, size-wise anyway. And they sell them to you in 2 pieces. It makes it a whole lot easier to put in. But we'll cover all that stuff when we get to it. My point is that when it comes to taking the torque boxes out, I'm going to cut them out in chunks. I'm not going to try to save any edges or anything like that. I'm just going to get them cut out and get it out of the way. And then I can go back and I can clean all the edges and stuff up when I'm finished. But you do kind of want to mark where the old one was. There is a little bit of slop, a little bit of movement in there. So you want to try to put everything back where it was before, because it's going to affect, you know, the emergency brake cable and the fuel line on the driver's side. It's going to affect how the splash shields and stuff go in behind the fenders, and it's going to affect how they meet up with the floor. So you want to make sure all that stuff is in the right spot. And you can just look at the original panels, and you can see how everything matched up. You can see how tight the torque box is to the floor. You want to do that same thing, and there's a couple different reasons for it. One, the toe board actually welds to the torque box from inside the car. I know there's probably 8 or 10 welds, random welds in there. Another thing is I want to be able to seam seal this thing. Ford did a pretty crappy job of seam sealing these from the factory, and that's why moisture got down in between the two. and rusted them out. But we're going to seam seal it between the torque box and the firewall. So I want to make sure that this stuff fits as tight as I can possibly get it, because I don't want to goop a bunch of seam sealer in there. Okay, this is the patch that I did on the driver's side rail. This is just a piece of 2x2 1/8" thick angle, and you can pick this stuff up anywhere. I think I actually bought this stuff at Menards. But this side actually had a fairly big hole in it. I'm going to replace the other side just because it's going to be easier. This side I had to. But when I cut it lengthwise, I cut it the exact same length of the original rail. I'll go up inside the car and I'll show you that. But this is all going to be covered, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. The floor support actually goes just above where I cut it and comes into right around in here somewhere. But I'll show you all that when I get it welded in. Okay, and now here inside the car, I still have to finish welding this, but you can see the edge of the angle works out to the exact same length of the original rail. And you'll see this gap right here. There's actually a gap there from the factory. The two halves of the frame rail don't actually attach here. So it works out perfect if you use a piece of 2-inch angle. But I'll be able to go in, now that I'm getting stuff cut out of the way, I'll be able to go in and I'll be able to clean up stuff like this and get it welded up. But I'll show you all that before Okay, I'm probably gonna cut this one off for the week. I'm gonna go get these torque boxes cut out of here. Watching me grind isn't exciting at all, so I'm not gonna bore you guys with that. I mean, this video is probably boring enough as it is. I'm gonna go get those cut out. It's probably gonna take me a while, and then I'll pick up where we left off in the video next week. But I've got to get a couple more parts ordered. I think I'm gonna go ahead and replace the cross member that goes between the underfloor supports through the transmission hump. And I'm still waiting on the torque box for the driver's side. You know how supply chain stuff is right now. I don't know when I'm gonna get it. I actually ordered a new lower hinge for the driver's side door so I can start mocking up the body and setting gaps and everything. And it's on back order. I'm looking for one. But that's gonna be a good video too. I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna set all the gaps on the car. I'm gonna get everything adjusted and make sure that everything fits the way I want before paint. That makes building the car later super easy. But I'll show you guys a bunch of tips and tricks for setting gaps and how to adjust doors and fenders and all that kind of crap. But that'll probably be in a couple weeks. I'm not really sure. But for now, get out in the shop, work on your project. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you next week.